Hey everyone, yet another daily vlog. I think this is maybe my 12th vlog in about 17 days, so I haven't achieved dailiness. And as I think I mentioned before, a number of times I've recorded things and then listened back to them and not liked them. When I started, this weird sun on me. When I started vlogging, not helping. When I started this idea of a daily vlog, I just thought I'd get on, randomly talk about a few comic book things that were in my head, and then move on to the next day. And instead, I almost by accident have discovered myself doing kind of theme vlog. One day about event comics, one day about violence in comics, one day about women in comics, one day about science fiction in comics. And so this one is just going to be a random little dribs and drabs. It's kind of funny with these theme ones. Always, every time my thought going into them before I record them is I have this thing that I've been pondering a little bit. I might have even put pondering into one of the titles. And I don't really have a position on it. I have a thought here, a thought there. But they always somehow end up being subjects where there's a position to take. I don't end up meaning to criticize comics or be critical, but I always look at both sides, and then it seems like I'm taking a side, and I don't know if I always really meant to or really do. I mean, even on whether things are too extreme in comics, I have all kinds of mixed feelings. I'm probably one of those annoying people who, if I'm with two people who are debating against each other, I'll probably start supporting this side of the debate, and then I'll switch over and start supporting that side of the debate. And soon both people will be irritated with me. So yeah, it almost, looking back on these topic vlogs, I almost feel like, here's one thing I want to criticize in comics, here's another thing, another thing, but that was not my intention. And for any little flaws that I pick out in comics, I'm going to keep reading comic books, I'm going to keep loving comic books. They could get a lot more sexist or a lot more violent, a lot less, there could be more events, whatever. They're still a great art form in my mind. They could be better, but anything could always be better. It's just, this is all about just sharing my idle thoughts. And as I said, about being the kind of person who always is always thinking about different sides of things. It's also a kind of wishy-washiness. I can't decide on trades or floppies or even digital. I keep going back and forth, and I'm buying all of them in little bits and never quite sure if I'm making the right decision. I'm really jealous of those people who say, well, I know I like floppies and that's what I'm going to get. I wish I could be that kind of person, actually. But I'm also a economically conscious person, and so to choose all floppies is a hard choice economically. And that was going to segue into something in my head just a second ago as I was saying it. I was thinking, oh, well, I can move on to talk about that. I know. I was listening on my ride into work this morning to Fat Man on Batman, which had the most recent episode has an interview with Snyder and Capullo together talking about their Batman run. And as a side note, the Fat Man on Batman thing by Kevin Smith is good with some guests and not good with others. He's a good interviewer with a guest who has stuff to say. The interviews with Capullo and Snyder that he's done in the past were really good. And I haven't finished listening to this current interview, but as I left off, as I arrived into work, Snyder was talking about how he rewrites things a little bit for the trades. He goes back and, I guess, changes dialogue and captions and stuff. I don't know if they redo any of the art for the Batman trades. And the example he was giving was in Death of the Family, where he felt that when it came out, people took it a little wrong, so he was working on spinning it a little darker and a little bit more of a, to emphasize the death of the family, the negative impact of that, which makes me want to go look at the trade, and brings me back to my conundrum, trades versus floppies versus digital. If the trade is the sort of final addition, the real message that the writer wants to give, then maybe I should be getting the trade. I've never heard that. Well, I've heard another thing that made me want the trade was Punk Rock Jesus apparently added 12 more pages that he had originally wanted to put in, but didn't have room to put in the Punk Rock Jesus comic book, which made me feel very ripped off that I was paying more money to get less pages and less of the story by supporting Punk Rock Jesus in print, in its initial print run as a comic book. But generally, I haven't heard that people change. Is it actually a regular practice for writers to go back and slightly edit and change things in trades so that the story is even more the way they meant it to be? Maybe we'll eventually get more and more sort of director's cut trades. So that makes me kind of nervous buying the floppies and kind of pissed off. I feel, I've talked before about this, I feel like you should get the most if you're paying the most for floppies. You do get, I won't find it. Oh, you do get a better way to look at the art. You're not going to be able to lay that flat in the trade and see that whole picture the way you can here. So, and speaking of things in floppies, I've been picking up just a few of the Villain Months issues that are tie-in directly, as far as I can tell, with the continuity of comics I'm already following, like with Supergirl or with Green Arrow, and then and Swamp Thing and The Flash. And I bought my first actual 3D cover. I'd just been buying the $2.99 2D covers because I would look at the 3D covers and I'd say, yeah, that's cool, but I don't feel like I have to have that. But when I saw the Swamp Thing Arcane cover at the comic book store, I sort of felt like, oh, I have to have that. It's so cool. And I think it's because of it's a great picture, but as many of these covers are, a great drawing, but with the Arcane ripping himself open, and inside is Abby Arcane in her sort of Avatar of the Rot mode. So, but now that I own one, but just one, so I haven't invested deeply in these things, I feel less excited about the 3D covers, actually. It looks really cool when I hold it at a certain distance from myself at just the right angle. But from lots of other angles, there's so many parts of the picture that it's blurry. I understand David Raccoonus saying, that these things are making him kind of get headaches. There's something really annoying and niggling in my brain, and maybe this is why I haven't enjoyed very many 3D movies and haven't gone to very many 3D versions of movies, when there's always some part of the picture that's not quite in focus. But this one, of the ones I've seen, I'm still kind of happy I bought it. Another thing that makes me a little sad about the 3D covers is so far I haven't seen an issue that I could buy for my daughter, because she would go gaga over a cool 3D cover. I almost bought the Poison Ivy for her, but then just worried there wouldn't be stuff we could read together in there. And it would be cool if the Wonder Woman Cheetah issue might be something I could read to a child, but I'm assuming I can't. and I didn't really want to invest in that. So I couldn't think of any of the 3D covers that I could get for a kid, even though this, to a kid, this would be most exciting. There's no way, I have to hide this comic book. I mean, a rotting guy ripping open his body, I can't show that to a 5-year-old and not risk her having bad dreams and just generally being disturbed. But anyway, my general impression is actually that the Villains Month is very good. I hear people like on iFanboy podcasts beating down on it, but mostly I hear people liking it. The few things I've read so far are very good, and like this was very good. The art on the inside was so good. I'd like to see Jesus Saez do more of these kind of weird horror comics. The story was excellent. I suppose it's, not the most important story in the world, but it was pretty intense and adds kind of new layers to the background of Abby Arcane and to Arcane himself. I'm a little trepidatious that are they going to bring Arcane back into the main Swamp Thing storyline again already? Because really Arcane has been a shadow over most of the Swamp Thing run in the New 52. And he's a cool villain, but let's have other stuff. So a number of the other the Villains Month ones I haven't read yet because I'm trying to read things in order, like the one that ties in with Supergirl. I have 3 issues of Supergirl to read first, now that I'm back to buying new comics, before I can read that Villains issue. Another cool thing is, and I'm sure lots of people have talked about, the 3D back cover, the ad, and by now people getting it a lot are sick of it, but the fact that it's quite subtle. There's snow falling around Batman, and if you tilt it just right, you just see a whole bunch of other figures in his shadow. I find that a kind of subtle use of the 3D to be, with like a hidden picture in it, rather than think of them as 3D, to think of them, or as motion comics, but as hidden picture comics, I think would be much cooler. So one other thing, I guess, while I'm doing this kind of random vlog, I had a fanboy moment sort of in absentia yesterday at my comic book store. As a lot of you may know, Portland, Oregon, for some reason, is full of comic book creators. It almost feels like half of the well-known comic book creators live in Portland. And I've been told by people, Joe Keating was just in here, or someone, I might have got the name wrong, and Brian Michael Bendis I see around quite a bit, because I realized who he is because I recognized his voice from the Word Balloon podcasts. And I don't really have the urge to meet creators and to have brief little conversations with them and tell them how great they are or whatever. But although I did have a brief interesting conversation once with Chris Robertson at a signing in a store. And I liked him. But anyway, at the comic book store yesterday, I was standing or maybe 2 days ago. I'm filming this one day ahead of time, I think, than when I'm going to post it. So 2 days ago, at the comic book store on Wednesday, I was standing in line behind a fellow who was probably a bit older than me, and sort of half listening to him talking to the comic book store owner. They were joking around. And then he left. And then the comic book store clerk or owner told me that was Kurt Busiek. And Kurt Busiek is in my top tier of special writers. Writers who've created, my top 5 or top 10 comic book series. He's the creator of the long-going and currently going Astro City. And so even though he was already gone, I felt my brain kind of going all fanboy and how I wanted to gush over him and tell him how great he was. So I'm kind of glad I didn't know till he left the store, because I'm sure in my urge to gush, I would have just said something stupid, and my brain wouldn't have worked very well. And yeah, I just don't want to be that guy, but I mean, I'm for some reason got a stupid little thrill to know that I shop at the same comic book store as one of my favorite creators, as the creator of one of my favorite series. And it's great that Astro City is still really good after all these years. So it wouldn't be embarrassing to talk to him and only be interested in what he did in the past. But I don't think I will talk to him or any of the people who may or may not be in my comic book stores. I don't know why I don't like it. I don't like the attempt to rub shoulders with celebrity or treat people as celebrity or whatever it is. So for any comic book creators out there who I like, these videos are my tribute to you. I don't want to do it in some other way. So I think that's all I've got to say for now, and I will catch you tomorrow. So I'll probably still do some of the themey kind of vlogs, you know, about just one thing, where I try to muddle through on my thoughts on those. But I'm going to try and break it up, and I'm going to keep trying to do 31 vlogs almost daily. And for those of you hanging on with me, that's great, and I'll talk to you later.